Herzlich willkommen zum Kino gegen Austerität heute mit dem Film Yallah Gaza von Roland Nurier. Wir zeigen den Film heute zum ersten Mal mit deutschen Untertiteln, also eine gewisse Deutschlandpremiere, und dafür gilt unser Dank an die kooperative Arbeit der Übersetzung der Untertitel, insbesondere an Abdel, an Mona, an Vic, an Thomas und Marie-Dominique, die das möglich gemacht haben, dass das heute so klappt. Wir haben die große Ehre und freuen uns riesig, zur Einführung und Diskussion Wesam Amer hier begrüßen zu dürfen, an den ich gleich das Wort übergebe. Schön, dass du da bist. Wir werden eine Einführung von Wesam hören. Er wird auf Englisch sprechen. Falls ihr Schwierigkeiten zur Verständnis habt, vielleicht fragt ihr euren Nachbar, Nachbarin, ob ihr euch gegenseitig bei Flüsterübersetzungen unterstützen könnt. Ansonsten könnt ihr vielleicht noch gleich umsetzen. Wir sehen eine kurze Grußbotschaft vom Regisseur, die er extra für den heutigen Abend aufgenommen hat. Dann wird es den Film geben und nach einer kurzen Pause können wir dann zur Diskussion hier zusammenkommen. Wir unternehmen das Kino gegen Austerität aus der Kampagne International solidarisch Schluss mit Austerität und auch besonders heute Abend mit dem Team aus dem Referat für internationale Studierende im AStA der Uni Hamburg. Damit kämpfen wir um die internationalistische Orientierung, Ambition und Praxis in der Studierendenschaft und darüber hinaus, weil das besondere Bedeutung oder von immenser Bedeutung ist für die Beendigung von Krieg, Unterdrückung und Elend, aber auch insbesondere dafür, dass wir unsere Potenziale und Möglichkeiten für ein menschenwürdiges Leben rund um den Globus gemeinsam wahrnehmen und gestalten. Und ich denke, dass diese Bedeutung von Internationalismus in besonderer Weise bedeutlich wird im Kampf um ein Palästina in Frieden und Freiheit gegen die jahrhundertlange Unterdrückung, koloniale Unterdrückung vom imperialistischen Westen und Israel. Genau damit wollen wir uns heute Abend auch befassen, was unsere Verantwortung hier ist, um den Völkermord zu beenden. Zum Organisatorischen vielleicht ganz kurz ein paar Worte. Ihr findet hier links Getränke und Snacks gegen Spende. Und bitte spendet auch gerne, damit machen wir dieses Kino hier. Ihr findet auch einiges an Propagandamaterial, was ihr gerne mitnehmen könnt für die kommenden Aktivitäten für Frieden und soziale Gerechtigkeit. Ihr findet da auch eine Kontaktliste, in die ihr euch gerne eintragen könnt, wenn ihr von unseren weiteren Kinoveranstaltungen und Aktivitäten mitbekommen, eingeladen werden wollt. Es gibt auch Decken, falls es zu kalt wird. Die Toiletten befinden sich im AStA. Ihr könnt am Rand der Reihen vielleicht Leute ansprechen, falls ihr es aufsuchen müsst. Ansonsten gibt es in der Pause dafür auch gemeinsam Gelegenheit. Okay, so jetzt zu Wesam. Wesam Amer ist oder war Dekan der Kommunikationswissenschaftlichen Fakultät. Also der Kommunikationswissenschaftlichen Fakultät der Gaza-Universität. Er hat hier an der Uni Hamburg promoviert und im Anschluss dann in Gaza dort gewirkt, bis er vor dem Krieg und Völkermord fliehen musste. Er hatte nun für 2 Jahre ein Stipendium von Scholars at Risk in der Cambridge-Universität, wo er nun lebt und auch weiter um die Beschäftigung dort wirkt und kämpft. Wesam ist besonders involviert und umtriebig im Kampf um Bildung, Wissenschaft und Kooperation als Alternative zu Krieg, Zerstörung und Auslöschung. Er ist an zahlreichen Initiativen beteiligt, Konferenzen, Veranstaltungen, wie auch heute Abend. Er hat unter anderem auch mitgewirkt an einem sehr guten Beschluss des Akademischen Senats der Uni Marburg zum Ausbau der Kooperation und Austausch mit der Universität zwischen Deutschland und Palästina. Er arbeitet daran, dass es einen Entwicklungsplan für Frieden in Nahost gibt. Und an der Uni Hamburg haben wir uns kennengelernt, auch im gemeinsamen Kampf für hier Aufklärung über die Rolle Deutschlands im Unterstützung von Israel und im Genozid. Und wir haben unter anderem zusammen die Konferenz Academia Under Attack und eine Ringvorlesung unternommen. Und deswegen ist es eine besondere Ehre, dass wir heute wieder mit dir diskutieren können. Und ich übergebe dir das Wort.
Right, good evening. Good evening, everyone. It's always a pleasure to return to the city that I feel home always in. I love Hamburg. I love the University of Hamburg. It's where I did my PhD. I'm very thankful for friends and colleagues who invited me and for organizing the event today. I would like to thank my friends and colleagues for the invitation and for organizing this event. Today, I'm particularly pleased to share with you some experiences and thoughts about Gaza, the place. I don't feel it's a competition between Hamburg and Gaza, but Gaza is the place where I was born and I grew up, and also I learned. I was educated in refugees schools, and I worked, and which I continued, or I should continue to call, of course, home. For me, Gaza is also deeply connected, not only to me as a person, but also to my family history. I was born in Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza, a city of course, in the south, where my parents and grandparents were displaced from our indigenous village. It's called Beit Daras. It's a village near Ashkelon, El Majdal, in Palestine. It's a village that I've never been able to visit in my life so far. Yet, like generations of Palestinians, we have continued to live with determination, resilience, and hope. And today, possibly you will hear the word hope so much. Of course, a hope for a better future, for a better life, and most importantly, for an end to the Israeli ongoing occupation, and for freedom and independence. And this brings me to the film that we are going to watch today, Yallah Gaza. At the heart of the film is an idea that I find deeply powerful: the fury to live, the determination to keep fighting to survive, even though the circumstances, the constraints, the obstacles that our people in Palestine have been struggling with. For me, it is not an abstract idea. It's deeply personal. It speaks to the determination of people to continue living, creating, loving, learning, and hoping, even when ordinary life is made extraordinarily difficult and mostly impossible. The fury to live, the determination to continue to survive, is not simply to survive, but to live with dignity, to maintain culture and identity, to educate the current and next generations, to build relationships and communities, and to continue imagining a better future. And this is the Gaza that I like to begin with today. So Gaza is not an abstract geographical or political space. It is a place of memories, relationships, and belonging. It's where I went to school, where I learned, worked, and built friendship, and from where I came to Hamburg in 2011, and to where I went back when I finished my PhD. So it's where I experienced such ordinary moments that make up a life. When Gaza is represented in the international, mostly in the Western media, and more specifically in German media, because I'm a media and communication researcher, I focus also on German media. Much of this everyday life is missing. Only one stereotype that Western media tries to draw about Gaza. The world often sees Gaza through images of war, destruction, blockade, and the humanitarian crisis. Of course, these are realities, and no one can deny these realities, and deeply important, of course, but they don't tell the whole story. These realities are part of the story, but it's not all the story. It was a place, or Gaza was a place of extraordinary beauty and ordinary moments. There was the sea, the beaches, the olives, or the olive trees, and the fields. There were markets and streets, very similar to what we see in Hamburg, to what we see in Germany. There were family relations, gatherings, weddings, and celebrations. There was music, poetry, dabka, and art. There was football, friendship, laughter, and love. There were schools and universities. Teachers taught, students studied, doctors worked, farmers cultivated the land, fishermen went to sea, artists created. Academics, including myself, did research. We competed for research grants. Academics fought for producing knowledge. Businesses opened their doors. Families raised their children. Young people studied and imagined careers. Again, people built relations, developed professions, and made plans for the future. Generations followed one another. Children grew up, went to school, universities, became teachers, doctors, academics, artists, creators, and professionals. Culture, traditions, memories, and knowledge were passed from one generation to the next. This beautiful, ordinary, and continuous life is often the part of the Gaza that is least visible internationally, and mainly in the international and Western media. And this is actually very important because a society should not be defined only by the moments in which it is destroyed. Western media generally, when they cover Israeli-Palestinian affairs and mainly the Gaza, they only draw the negative stereotype, always a dark side about Gaza. But behind this dark side, there has always been a society. There have always been people living on the land. So it should also be understood through what its people create, preserve, celebrate, and pass on. So Gaza, that is not only a place of conflict, but a place of life. At the same time, it's important not to romanticize this life. Of course, I try to show a beautiful image of life in Gaza that is not seen or not shown in the Western media. But I have to be very careful not to romanticize the life, even before October 7th, 2023. The beauty, continuity of everyday life in Gaza existed under profoundly difficult and extraordinary conditions that resulted from, obviously, the Israeli blockade and siege, which comes in the context of the Israeli ongoing occupation for decades. Gaza is a small and densely populated Palestinian territory. So since 2007, it has been under severe Israeli blockade accompanied by extensive restrictions on the movement of people and goods. These conditions shaped almost every aspect of everyday life in Gaza. For many Palestinians, including myself, traveling outside Gaza to study, work, visit family, or seek medical treatment was extremely difficult. The economy was severely constrained. Opportunities for young people were very limited, and access to essential resources and services was often uncertain. So these conditions continued year after year, alongside repeated Israeli military escalations, attacks, aggressions, and violations of the Palestinian rights, violations of the international law and the international humanitarian law. So despite the immense challenges, Gaza remained a functioning society. I have to repeat. Schools educated children, universities, academics, researchers produced knowledge. Hospitals cared for patients. Farmers cultivated the land. Artists created. Families raised the next generation. And young people continued to study, work, and dream for a better future. So it was not an ordinary society living under profoundly abnormal conditions. And of course, the beautiful side of Gaza is the central, or was actually the central paradox of life before October 7th. We tried our best. We did all what we can or what we could. At least we dreamed for a better future. We hoped for a better life. This is the fury to live that I believe lies at the heart of the film that we are going to watch. It's the insistence that despite everything, life must continue. And yet, we are watching the film today with the knowledge of what happened after October 2023. You know, the film was released in May 2023, before October 2023. And I think it was first shown in France a month after October, in November 2023. So the Gaza of everyday life, the Gaza of the streets, homes, schools, universities, cultural spaces, families, and communities has been profoundly transformed by the genocidal war and the destruction that followed. So as we watch Yallah Gaza, I would like us to hold two realities together. The Gaza that the film invites us to see, a living society full of culture, creativity, relationships, aspirations, and hope. And second, the Gaza that we know today, a society that has experienced immense destruction, displacement, and loss. So the film, therefore, allows us to see something that is often missing from the international media representation, the life that existed before the images of destruction. And perhaps this is why the film is meaningful to me. That behind every headline and statistic, behind every single number, there are people with homes, families, friendships, education, dreams, and hopes. Above all, it reminds us that Gaza is not only a place of suffering, but a place where life has been lived. It reminds us that behind every headline, every statistic, and every image of war, there are people who had lives. And perhaps the most important thing that the film asks us to remember is that Gaza is not only a place that has suffered. It is a place that has lived. And again, this is the fury to live, the determination to live that I would like to invite you to encounter in the film today. The question then is not only what was life like in Gaza, it's also how was the life represented to the outside world. There is often a significant gap between living in Gaza and seeing Gaza through the media. For many people who have never been to Gaza, their understanding of the territory of Gaza, comes almost entirely through news coverage and the images that funerals, hospitals, casualties, and the humanitarian suffering. Always the image of smoke, destruction, among other negative representation. Of course, these images are real. They document genuine and devastating experiences, but they also create a particular way of seeing Gaza. Through this dominant visual framework, Gaza can become reduced to a place of permanent crisis, a place of violence and destruction, where Palestinians are primarily represented or seen as victims. This is where the politics of representation becomes very important. I say representation is never simply about showing reality. It's about selecting reality. What is shown, what is left out, whose voices are heard, and whose stories remain invisible. And of course, I would say what is visible is political, and what remains invisible is also political. So the film does not deny the blockade, violence, or political realities surrounding Gaza. Instead, it asks us to look beyond the dominant images of a crisis and to see what is often missing from conventional news coverage. Of course, it shows many things: dabka, families, continuity of work, everyday relationships. It gives us something that is often missing from the dominant media image of Gaza: the everyday, and the everyday matters. Of course, when people are represented but only during the moments of a crisis, they can easily become reduced to only to one image, to one stereotype, victims of that crisis. We see the moment of death, but not always the life that came before it. We see the destroyed house, but not the family that built a life inside that house. I see my damaged house, my damaged university, but not the students who studied there, the academics who taught there or worked there, the knowledge that was produced there. It's good to show the victim, the dark side, but it's not enough. What is behind it? What preceded it? This is why I say representation is political. What becomes visible, or what is visible, is political. And also, what is invisible is political. Called the image of the displaced people. But this image has never, or is not always, the person, the people who were before the displacement. A student, teacher, artist, a doctor, a farmer, a parent, or a friend. So the media image can therefore unintentionally flatten a complex society into a single narrative of suffering. And this is why I always feel unhappy, because when I say to people, when they ask me, are you from Gaza? I say, yes, I'm from Gaza. The first reaction, oh, you're from Gaza? Yes, I'm from Gaza. Then you get this feeling, because the image drawn about Gaza is always as a victim. Again, it's real, but it's not the whole story. And I think this is one of the important contributions of Yallah Gaza. It restores complexity. So the film invites us to move between two different ways of seeing Gaza: victimhood and agency. It shows many things, and the film touched my heart because some of the people appeared on the film were very close contacts, friends, people I know. And here I would like to mention one guy who used to be a schoolmate. We learned together, we grew up together. I was so happy to see him appearing on the film. But also, I was so saddened to see that he was forced to leave Gaza, to train Dabka somewhere else. Dabka, is very quiet, is very powerful for us. It preserves the culture, the continuation of the generations that passed from one generation to another. I should have started by the word Yallah, but I kept it in the middle of my talk. Yallah is a word, is an Arabic word. I know here some friends from Gaza, they know the word Yallah and can carry different meanings depending on the context. Let's carry on, let's move on, let's forward on, let's continue. So Yallah in itself as a word has a powerful meaning to show the determination to continue and to keep moving on and moving forward. And perhaps this is what the film ultimately captures. Not simply the ability to survive, but the determination to continue living. I know this would celebrate and glorify the resilience of people. On one side, this is great, this is important, this is much respected. But there is also a tension here that I think is very important. The language of resilience can be empowering because it recognizes Palestinian agency, strength, and determination. Also, it can become very problematic. When we constantly describe Palestinians as resilient, do we risk making resilience an exception? Or do we risk making resilience an expectation? Do you expect the people to be resilient? Do we risk normalizing the conditions that make such extraordinary resilience necessary? People should not have to demonstrate exceptional resilience simply to live an ordinary life. That is the tension. This is the tension that I think Yallah Gaza leaves us with. Of course, the film challenges the representation of Palestinians as passive victims. At the same time, it encourages us to think critically about whether celebrating resilience can sometimes allow the abnormal conditions in which people live to appear normal. The point, therefore, is not to choose between victimhood and resilience. It's to recognize both the reality of suffering and the agency of those who live through it. To acknowledge what has been done to people without allowing that to become the only way we see them. And this is where I think Yallah Gaza makes its important invention. We need to look at life, culture, people, relationships. Look at what people create, preserve, and hoped for. Because if we only see Gaza through destruction, as the Western media always try, we risk losing sight of the society that existed before the destruction and of people who continue to hope for peace, freedom, dignity, education, opportunity, and the return to ordinary life and the future in which their children can grow up in safety. I wish I could not get my children outside Gaza. I wish we could stay in Gaza after October 7th. So we should not allow violence to become the only story that is shown about Gaza. I would like to end by moving beyond the film itself and towards what I believe what we need to do next. Of course, the film insists a lot on the fury to live, the determination of Palestinians to continue living, creating, learning, working, and hoping despite extraordinary conditions. But I believe that after October 2023, we need to move beyond celebrating resilience or romanticizing the Palestinian resistance. Resilience cannot be the solution to a problem that is political and structural. People should not have to be endlessly resilient simply because their basic rights are denied. While we ask people to be resilient, their rights to exist, to survive, their rights for freedom, for dignity, for a better future should not be denied. They should not have to be resilient because they can't move freely or their homes are destroyed, or because their schools and universities are attacked and damaged, or because they live through repeated cycles of military escalations, genocides, and wars. The question, therefore, is not simply how resilient are the Palestinians. The question is, why are Palestinians constantly required to be resilient in order to live an ordinary life? Why should I be asked to be resilient all of my life? Why my rights to exist, to live, to hope for a better future are denied? First step is to recognize my rights as a Palestinian to live in a dignity in an independent state with full freedom of movement. This is where I believe we need to move from resilience to rights, the right to live safely, the right to freedom, to education, to movement, to build a home, to develop a society, the right simply to self-determination. These are not privilege. They are rights. And rights should not depend on how resilient a people can be. They must be guaranteed. And this requires us to confront the political conditions that have shaped life in Gaza for decades. There can be no substantial solution to the suffering in Gaza and in Palestine without addressing its underlying causes. People talk about the solution, one-state solution, two-state solution, where we should vote the Palestinians, we should keep them in Gaza, we should give them, freedom, some freedom of flexibility. But have you ever heard the politicians, the governments, talk about the causes, the roots of the problem? That means we need to see an end to occupation, to the Israeli ongoing occupation for decades. It means the implementation of international law. It means accountability when international law is violated. It means recognizing the rights of Palestinians to freedom, dignity, and self-determination. Humanitarian assistance is essential, is well respected. Reconstruction is very essential, of course, but neither humanitarian aid nor reconstruction can substitute our political rights and justice. We need humanitarian aid in Gaza, but the problem is not the people are hungry. There is a lack of a political solution. And the rights of people in Gaza, unfortunately, are denied. So restriction without justice risks becoming a cycle of rebuilding and destruction. I know Germany has contributed a lot to rebuild Gaza, but what happened to the buildings, to the finances, to the funds that Germany donated in Gaza? Simply destroyed. And then, because one simple thing, one simple reason, the way Western politicians look at Gaza and in general to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, only from a humanitarian perspective or from economic perspective. And Israel looks at Gaza as a solution or Palestine as a solution only from a military perspective. And all these perspectives failed in 2008, 2009, 2012, 14, 21, 22, all Israeli escalations and wars against Palestinians failed to bring peace, security for Israelis or for Palestinians. All European, Western, American, British interventions in the conflict to find a solution tackled the whole affairs only from a humanitarian perspective. While they want to feed Palestinians before October 7th, they used to provide Israel with weapons under the table. But then after October 7th, everything becomes on the table at the front of the people. So there should be reconsideration of the way how to deal with Israeli-Palestinian affairs. If it is not dealt from a political perspective to find a political solution, unfortunately, we would not see any stability for, or any solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We need to see the implementation of the international law and a political framework that guarantees the rights and security of Palestinians. I would like to invite you to read a document or a proposed paper that I was part of, that was proposed by a Palestinian technical group that I was proudly part of, that we proposed armistice plan. And this armistice plan was based on certain principles. I'll just mention them quickly. First principle, we need to see immediate ceasefire and adherence to international law. All parties must end violence, Palestinians and Israelis. Engage in diplomacy and respect international law. And we need to have the international community intervention to practice its pressure on Israel to stop how to end its violence against Palestinians and respect the international law. The state of Palestine governance, or should govern the Palestinian territories, and reform and renewal, of course, the PLO, and there are other principles. To end, I would say a suitable future cannot be built on the permanent insecurity of one people or the permanent fear of another. Violence would only lead to one direction, to violence. Military escalations, attacks, aggressions, genocide would never bring peace or stability. Our children deserve to grow up without war, without fear, without violence. Peace is not simple, or simply, peace is not simply something we owe to future generations. We need peace. We need stability. We need prosperity. We need sustainability, not for the next generations. They will manage what to do and how they can do. We need it for ourselves, for our generation. And this is with your support, with the international community intervention, we can achieve this. We need peace for ourselves. Why I can come freely to Germany from the UK, but I can't go back to Gaza. And thousands of Palestinians cannot go and see their families in Gaza. So peace is not a distant aspiration, it is an urgent necessity. And we need to move again beyond romanticizing the Palestinian resilience to more sustainable support for Palestinians. We need to make action. Solidarity is not empathy, of course. I do respect the human feelings, sympathy, empathy, but solidarity is action, and we need to make action. Thank you so much. Thank you.